Buying a new construction condo does not mean you live a worry-free life. Let me explain now. Hi, welcome back to another Coffee with Coleman, where we love to discuss Washington, D.C., business, real estate, all that good stuff. My name is John Coleman, and I'm a real estate agent here in Washington, D.C. with the Jason Martin Group. Please note that clicking the like button below is not only encouraged, but also increases the likelihood of good karma given by yours truly. Wow. And if this stuff is relevant to you, you like DC, you like real estate, go ahead and subscribe, because then you'll be alerted directly each week when I release new videos. When a home buyer approaches me and says that they want to buy a new construction condo, it's typically for one of two reasons. They prefer the aesthetics, they like the white kitchens and new appliances and all that stuff, or they just like that fresh, stress-free lifestyle where everything's new, you don't have to worry about things being broken. But the reality is that doesn't always mean that it's going to be stress-free. So when a client asks me, "Hey John, what are your best tips to consider when buying a new construction condo?" I replied and I said, I got 8 of them. So we're gonna go over what those 8 are. So tip number 1 is it's not always about the sign in front. It's about the developer who built it. A lot of times you're gonna have a sign put in the front yard. That sign has actually nothing to do, most of the time, about who actually built the property and what kind of quality went into it. So seeing a sign doesn't necessarily mean much. What you want to know is more about the developer themselves. Most of the time, condo developers protect themselves by building the condo under an LLC, which is nice for them. It also makes it difficult for you to know what other projects they have done, since many of those LLCs are like burner phones. They use them once and then they get rid of them. However, if you research the LLC, you might be able to find who the charter members are and do a little bit of digging that way. The other thing I like to do for my clients is we can reach out to the listing agent to see what other projects the developer has done. That can give you a chance to research those buildings, to see how they're holding up. And even sometimes we've called agents that have sold to clients in other buildings, and we can ask them, what do your clients think of it? Are they liking it? Have they had any problems? And if they have had problems, have they come back and helped solve them? That can be one of the best ways to get a peace of mind. Tip number 2 is get an inspection. Some will assume that since the city should have gone through, they have their inspectors going and doing checkoffs, that everything should be hunky-dory. It's not uncommon to leave a new construction with a decent sized punch list of things that you want. Since it's new, and since you're probably paying for the privilege of everything to be new, I think a developer should be held to a pretty high standard of a final finished product. So one of the things we'll do is we'll put our list together, and we'll also do something called a blue tape walkthrough, where we go through and do blue tape around the property to ensure that it's all ready to go, the painting's perfect, and the dents that you have in the wall when you move in are because of you and your furniture. You can blame the movers. Number 3 is check the permits. There's a lot of paperwork that goes into building new condos and converting the building into condos. They need something called a certificate of occupancy for you to close. It doesn't hurt to request copies of those permits and other helpful documentation, because that'll be helpful for the condo community as a whole to have those on file should you need them in the future. And it's good to know that they did everything by the book. Tip number 4 is to expect delays. Speaking of that certificate of occupancy, sometimes that and the tax IDs can really hold things up. And I even remember reviewing a contract for a building in the Southwest waterfront that says the seller is able to delay the building and the project delivery up to 5 years. Their contracts are pretty friendly to them. So remember that when the seller tells you to expect when it to be done and all the permits should be ready by a certain date, you can't trust it until that's in hand. A lot of people are gonna have issues locking their rates and doing things like that. So it's good to keep a floating idea that these things could be delayed. Don't cancel your lease, and talk to your agent and your lender and make sure that all the stuff is lined up for what you need to do, but prepare to be patient. It's more of the exception than the rule that new construction closes on time. I've had a lot of clients that months later were actually able to move into their properties, but since we had those conversations on the forefront, they were not in that bad of a spot. Tip number 5 is deciding whether you want to buy early or buy late. Buying early in the construction can be awesome. You get your first pick. If everything sells very quickly, the builder might even raise prices of similar units that come on later. However, the opposite can be true too. If you buy early and the other units are not selling, then other units might actually get sold for cheaper than what you bought for. At least you got to pick your unit though, right? So mentally, you need to be in a spot where you understand that the pros and cons of what it looks like to buy early in the project and late in the project. So 6s, know your protections. There are certain structural and building warranties that come with the property. The ability to quickly make right on some of these things can still be a very drawn out and tedious process if you need to get the developer back. So while there are some assurances that the builder has to make sure things are okay, it could be like pulling teeth with some developers to get them back into the project to make things right, and it can be drawn out for a little while. All right, number 7 is the builder's contract. I alluded to this earlier, but it's important to know that when you're buying new constructions, more often than not, you're going to be using a different contract than your standard sales contract. These contracts are drawn up by the attorneys of the seller, which means they are most favorable for the seller. And so it's important for you to understand that you need to read through what's expected out of you, and then also understand that you're able to make adjustments if you want. Doesn't mean they have to agree to them, but you're able to try if you want to. For instance, it might not have something drawn out about exactly how an inspection contingency could line up. You might be able to put that in there to best protect you so you can understand what you can expect out of them and yourselves as you're going through that process. And it's also worth noting that due to DC regulations, new construction condos, you get a 15-day rescission period from when you sign the documents until when you can actually pull out. So you get a chance to review the public offering statement and all the things that go with the building to ensure that they're in line with what you're expecting. If there's anything you do not like in there, you can cancel the contract in that 15 days and get out. A lot of times we'll operate our contingencies within that period, but it's really a case-by-case basis. You need to talk to your agent about how to plan that to best protect yourself. Number 8 is offer price. And it's all to say, like, this isn't set in stone. One might propose that these are the prices you have to pay, and that's what you need to do in order to get the place. This isn't a supermarket. You can pay what you're willing to pay. Again, doesn't mean they have to accept it, but just like any property, you should still be pulling comps. You should still understand the value. And what I always tell people is if you're buying new construction, you're typically paying a bit of a premium for it to be new. So the comps of older buildings might be a little bit lower than that. So I would factor into some of the equations as I'm working through it. Sometimes I see these buildings, I'm like, how are they gonna resell for these numbers? And they sell for a whole bunch more. Sometimes I say, how are they gonna sell for more? And sure enough, 3 or 4 years later, they're selling for about the same cost as where they were, but the neighborhood around it has improved. So, all right, that's what I got today. Those are my 8 tips about buying new construction condos. And these are relevant not only here in DC, but also in other places. I would love to hear if you have any tips or if you have questions. If you are thinking about buying a new construction condo, go ahead and reach out to me. I can walk you through the steps, what to expect out of the contract, and all of that good stuff. We love doing that, and we know a lot of the good developers versus some people you probably don't prefer quite as much, and we're happy to share that with you. All right, so I really enjoyed sharing this with you today, and I really want to thank you for stopping by another Coffee with Coleman. Peace.